the Sewers podcast. Strap into the party wagon and hold on to your pizza.
Hello, everybody. I'm sure if you're a regular listener, you will know that this is not your regular host's voice. Today, women have stormed the sewers and we're taking them over for this podcast. I myself am Lydie Waters, known as the Channel 6 Chick. I am a Tmnt fan, part of a comic book club, and the mother of 3. And now I'm going to pass it over and let one of our kick-ass women introduce themselves. Anya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Anya. I am also a TMNT fan. I am a mother of 1 who has been recently introduced to TMNT and fallen in love with it himself. And I'm excited to be here. And just thanks, Justin, for having us on the show.
And next we have shell-kicking Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm an 80s kid. My introduction to Turtles was the 80s cartoon, so I've been here for a while. I'm married without kids, but with a very beloved dog that I share my Ninja Turtle collection with.
So these are your hosts, I guess, for today. And we're going to deep dive right into our questions. This is a fun one we had to ask one another when we were getting to know each other. So Anya, can you tell us who your favorite turtle is?
My favorite turtle is Donatello, and I love him because he is everything that I am not. He is smart and he is ingenious. He's kind of a MacGyver and comes up with the answers and the solutions in a very creative way. And I just aspire to be a lot like him. But I have a soft spot in my heart for all of the turtles. Just Donatello is definitely my favorite. What about you, Amanda?
Mine has to be Raph. I loved him when I was a kid. I think he's a character that has grown with me as I've aged. You know, when I was little, I loved him because he was sassy. And then when I was a teen, I think I loved him because he was ragey and angsty, you know. And then as an adult, I think I love his protectiveness and his compassion and all of his vulnerabilities and the things that make him like a fully fleshed out character. In my opinion, the most realistic one because of his faults. So yeah, he's just kind of grown with me through all of these years. So he's my favorite.
That's awesome. So my favorite has been Mikey. When I was a kid, it was just because I think he blurted out silly things when everything was serious. And I was that kid in class who the teacher would remind, we are doing math. This is not funny. So I really identified with him that way. And as I read the IDW comics, I saw that he was very much the heart of his family. He's the one who likes to gather them together. He's the one who's the most emotionally connected to them. And all throughout every iteration, he still does very silly things at very inappropriate times. And even as a 40-year-old, that is something I'm still learning to control. So I will always have a soft spot for him. When we were talking also, we shared kind of snap judgments about these. So Justin's not here to defend himself, but his favorite has always been Leonardo. And I found that very interesting because I have a middle child who is, I'll say a rule breaker, but upon reflection and after talking to Justin, she's not actually a rule breaker. The world is ordered according to her own moral compass. So she has a very strict guide that only she knows. For example, she stole a bully's bike and hid it. We see Leo very much governing the 4 brothers this way. And I think it's interesting that he, in some comics, is very close to Batman, who, you know, as a vigilante, has his own moral code that he follows too. So I feel like that resonates for the Leo fans. I was going to say, Anya, do you want to give us a snap judgment on one of our favorite characters?
I mean, I like I said, I love all the turtles. I do really love your interpretation of Mikey. I definitely do feel like he's the heart. And I know we've talked about how we see a little bit more of a mature and different version of him in IDW. And we get to see him have a little bit more of a not paternal, but whenever he's taking care of the children and looking out, he's always been the one that his brothers have looked out for. And then we get to see that growth in him when it's his turn to take care of children or take care of something else. So I definitely I mean, I can see the growth in all of the characters, including Raph, over the years in every iteration. It's been exciting to see these characters evolve and grow as all of us, being 80s children, have grown as well. So that's been really great.
Do you have a snap judgment you want to share, Amanda?
Yeah, are we doing snap judgments on
Yeah.
what people? Okay. So when I meet a Donatello stan, I'm just going to assume, and I think this is a good thing, that they place a high value in intellectualness, logical thinking, maybe the scientific process. And I don't know. I mean, I know you a little bit, Anya, and from what I can see, the way you break down martial arts and stuff like that, I could see those qualities in you. So,
It's a little bit obsessive, but as you could see when we were getting this all set up, I ended up marrying someone very much like a Donatello. He's very techie and helps me with all the things that I can't figure out. So I think I found my real life Donnie.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, I guess, Amanda, I'll give you my snap judgment on Raph fans, if you'd like it.
oh, yes, please.
So all of the Raph fans I've met are typically very passionate people. They find things they truly love and will deep dive into those and defend their friends and family to an extent that other people won't, where other people will try diplomacy. Everything's black and white for them. If you're against my friends or family, then I want nothing to do with you. So I feel like Raph fans are very important people in their communities, and they fight for things that matter to them. I think they're very passionate people with interesting hobbies, and I would always love to have a Raph fan as my friend.
I love that. I live and die for my fandoms. Like, it's a huge part of my life and what I do with my time, and I try to integrate into those communities. So, yeah, thank you. That sounds nice.
A lot of these are not wrong. I'm interested if anybody's listening what their kind of snap judgments are, and they can always comment on those. So as we mentioned, this is a women's or anybody who identifies as female podcast. And it's interesting because for a comic book that was centered around 4 brothers and their father, we're going to look a little bit at why do women love TMNT? So that'll be my first question here is what draws women to TMNT and what can women relate to? And I'll start with passing it over to Anya for this.
For me, I'm an only child, and growing up, definitely, I had a lot of friends. A lot of those friends were boys, but I always wanted brothers. I wanted that sense of brotherhood. It's just something that I've always craved. Even in adulthood, I found myself like looking at careers like firefighting and stuff like that. Where I'm like, man, if I were a firefighter, I would have a built-in brotherhood. And I think I found a lot of that in this show, growing up, that you could kind of live vicariously through this story and pretend like you were in that situation and what that would feel like. At least for me, that's what I identified with, was that sense of family. But I think for females in general, I mean, all of the morals, all of the lessons that we learn in every iteration can be applied regardless of your gender. It's, you're still, the same virtues apply. So I don't think that necessarily as a woman, just because there's 4 male turtles fighting, that I can't still see some of those characteristics in me or other women that I love. Amanda, what about you?
Oh, that's a really good answer. For me, I think I gravitated towards turtles. And I was little. Like, I was so little. I don't know how much being a woman or a little girl at that point mattered, but I think I saw them as outsiders. And in elementary school, I got bullied. I took the brunt of it in elementary school because I had large bosoms too early. So so you get that bullying, and I saw these outsiders that were superheroes, and I think that's probably why I liked them so much out of all the other options on TV. That was, they were one of my favorites. I think now that I'm an adult and I'm still watching them, I think I appreciate that they aren't hyper masculine. They're definitely superheroes, but they aren't your stereotypical superhero. I think they bring in a lot of like Japanese values, humbleness and putting others first. And I don't think that's always so prevalent in other superheroes. So I think that might be as a woman what appeals to me so much about them. It's kind of like the softer side of superheroing. Lydie?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit on that because I was also very much an outsider and an outcast within, I guess, social boundaries as well as my family. So for me, I have an adopted family, and I thought, wow, if these turtles, and I'm talking about the 1980s cartoon here that I was introduced to them with, if these turtles who were found in a pet store and they crawled all over some ooze became a family and their dad is a ninja rat, then really any of us can be family. And despite all their personal conflicts that they have, they always accept each other. There's never an instance where anybody's booted out of the family or out of the circle because they are each other's only friends initially because they don't know anybody else. And that really resonated with me, that even though this might not be the family I was born into, this is my family, and that I won't be kicked out, and there's always a place for me. And I found that with my best friend too. So it was just the two of us against the world. And sometimes I felt like, we could pretend that it was us against the Foot or us against Shredder. And it seemed to make life a little bit more bearable. It seemed to put things into context and made me feel a little bit like a superhero because I couldn't relate to people like Batman. I just found him a kind of very rich, out of reach man, and it was nothing like my life. Or Superman, who doesn't seem to have too many flaws. He's always just the good guy. So the turtles have up and down days. They have days that they fight with each other. But at the end of the day, it's always about that family nucleus. Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to add to anything anybody else said.
Yeah, I definitely, from what Amanda was saying, they definitely show a vulnerability that you don't see in a lot of, I wouldn't even just say superheroes, but just a lot of shows or stories. It's a lot of people fear being vulnerable when really that's the best way to grow. So it's just incredibly relatable. Even though, I hear from people all the time, it's a kids show, this is a kids thing. Why are you into this? The lessons don't apply just to children, or it transcends every age, and there is a different level of storytelling that it can be applicable to children, or it can relate and resonate more with an adult. But that's just the beauty of this franchise, that it's so strong, 40 years in the making, and it's because it's been able to be vulnerable and be transparent and be adaptable to every single generation that's come since its origin story. So it's exciting.
I'm so curious how many young men, in 1990, when they watched that movie, when they're all crying around the campfire, how many men went, or little boys went, oh, I'm allowed to cry. I'm allowed to show emotion. I would like to think that reached them in some way. So.
Sure.
I think so. Like even, we're talking about Raph and his emotional outbursts. And I think whether you're male or female, even when you're a teenager, that's something that's very relatable. And I think about the 80s cartoons and how often there was a lesson at the end that was literally spelled out for you. You saw that with He-Man, you saw that with G.I. Joe. Like, this was our lesson today, kids. Did you catch it? Or even Mr. T telling you something. I don't even feel like the Turtles needed Mr. T to tell us what the moral of that story was. And you kind of took it forward. And whether we realize how much television had an impact on us or not as adults, I think you're both right, Anya and Amanda, where we talk about the lessons we learned from Ninja Turtles. As silly as it might sound, they were good lessons.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said.
I'm going to go into our next question if everybody's good.
Okay.
So the next question we had was, what do we kind of think about female representation in TMNT? Although we've identified that even though, they were 4 brothers, it didn't really matter for our gender. But what does it matter for us that there is female representation? And if there is a version of a character you really felt changed things for you, it'd be really nice to know which character that was and why. And I'll give the floor. I'll mix it up now. I won't go to Anya. I'll go to Amanda. Ooh.
Okay. Sophie Campbell shook the comic book world. I love Jenica. I think the way they introduced her was done so well. You know, they gave her a long buildup. It was like she came out in like issue 50 something, and then she didn't transform until I think it was issue 95. So they let her character get so established first. And something that I've seen over and over and over in the community is don't change existing characters, create new ones. Well, that's what we did. You know, we finally got a female turtle. And for me, as a person that never really identified with April or really any of the existing women characters in the Turtleverse, I love seeing Jenica so much. Like when I was a little kid, I played with the turtle action figures. I played pretend as a turtle. I wasn't April. I was never April. I might have been Karai if she had been more prevalent at that time, but having Jenica come around was just the most amazing thing. And while like her solo story wasn't like my favorite thing ever, I really like how they've developed her character. I think her existence and her representation is really important. And I hope as this chapter of IDW comes to a close, that they carry her forward in some way, because I think it would just be an absolute disaster if they just were like, well, this is done, and, you know, threw her out and we never see her again. Or she shows up like Venus every once in a while. So, but I do think, you know, we have Alapex and Karai, and we do have some Ice Cream Kitty. We do have some really great female characters. So it's getting better. And I hope it just continues to improve. What do you think, Anya?
I think to echo your sentiment, I definitely think that this has grown over time. I mean, looking back, there was a small pool and it's slowly getting bigger with female characters, but I also think it's getting stronger. I love what IDW has done both with The Last Ronin and giving April character development. I love seeing her in a paternal role. Um, I I love seeing her kind of take on the grandmother role and making sure that these new turtles understand the depth of the history, what was before them. I also love Alopex. Like she is just amazing to me in the IDW comics. She was briefly in 2K12 and just not even, I mean, it's incomparable to me. They feel like two completely different characters. What they developed her personality to be in the comics is just amazing. Even though she's not a turtle, I still feel like she resonates just as much as any other character. And I do love, similar to Jenica, how she kind of had a story in the beginning where she was this villain and has kind of had this character arc in this development. And even though Raph is not my favorite character, it's made me so happy to see him find love and find that, you know, that peace that I feel like he struggled with. He's struggled so much in the comics, and she's brought out a softer side of him, which is really great to see. But I think female representation as a whole, it's just one of those things, just to me as a fan, even though like Amanda, you know, my first introduction was the cartoons in the 80s. But as a fan, I find myself tending to like the more modern iterations of TMNT. And I feel like that's not only just because the character depth is getting stronger, but because just the representation is better. It just feels like this franchise is growing and it's growing in the right direction. Yeah.
I think that's a really good answer. I think they both are. I know that for me, we talk about, you know, not identifying very much with April. And I would say that I did as a kid, because I knew that I wasn't the strong one. I knew I wasn't necessarily the smartest one, but I feel like she had a feistiness that helped her get out of situations, especially, let's say, in the 1980s cartoon. I really enjoyed April standing up to people and always kind of throwing things in their face, even though she knew she wasn't the ninja. I don't think she always thought she would be saved. So I don't ever feel like she was a damsel in distress. And then when I was older and I started reading the original comics, April is amazing, because we first meet her and she's working for Baxter Stockman, and she's actually coding the Mousers and catches on to what he's doing. So she's very smart, and her feistiness comes out in that she confronts him where somebody else might have gone around their back or tried to do something else first. She just head on went after him, got her in a lot of trouble. Of course, she's saved, but I feel like she always pulls her own weight. And I really liked that about her. And she drew me very much towards looking at journalism, because I never wanted to be a TV reporter. And I didn't know very much about coding when I was a kid, but discovered I like it as an adult. So I like that version of her. And then when we see different versions in IDW, she's a scientist. She tries to take defense lessons from Casey Jones so that she doesn't have to be the damsel if she can't get out of something. But that feistiness, that fire in her is always there. I feel like in whatever version of April we get, we never get a wallflower. We get somebody who knows what she thinks is right, what's wrong. She puts things together and she's very active. So I did like her. I have a thing about her that'll lead me into kind of a next question. And also thinking about Alopex, it's going to lead to my next question, which I'm getting ahead of myself. But I did also, it's hard for me because now as an adult, I also really admire Karai. If we look at the discipline, the talent, and we see that she's still, as an adult, a girl who wants her father's approval, I think that's very relatable. So we'll say she's an overachiever in this way. And her end is really kind of tragic because I feel like she doesn't get an opportunity to grow like the turtles do. And I think that's because she's in an environment without nurturing, without love, without care that Anya was bringing up with April, that we see there, but we always kind of see with Splinter and the turtles. And I'll give you guys a chance to add to that if you want, because I already have another one pinging after talking about this.
I love Karai. I'm still waiting to have a more fleshed out story. Like, she was great in Nickelodeon 2012, and then I feel like we got a completely different Karai in IDW. Also really a great character. I just want to see them do something with her, give her her own series, and let's get a whole complete story, because I think she's great. I always kind of prefer the physically ass kicking chicks. So I always liked Karai a little more than April. Though listening to you speak about April is really lovely. It's making me like her more, just listening to you talk so passionately about her. So
I agree. That was a great breakdown of April's character, because it is easy to just dismiss her, especially, I mean, we've all talked about how we're kind of an anomaly, but we like the Bayverse movies, but she gets a lot of hate. Megan Fox gets a ton of hate for her personal, or her portrayal of April in those two movies. And it is hard or it's very easy to just say, oh, she's a gray piece of paper character, that the way you said it, that definitely brings a lot of perspective and depth to each iteration, and making sure that each one has its own value.
Yeah, and I think she's lucky because she does get that development, right? Mm-hmm. And like Amanda was saying, Karai doesn't. Like, she's amazing on paper, but we never know exactly what motivates her, other than our guesses. Like, she wants to make her father proud, or, she's very dedicated to the way of the foot, but we don't know what really makes her tick. And I think that's what makes her hard to relate to, although we might like her as a character.
Yeah, I think she would make a great spinoff. Like, let's deep dive into that and see where that takes us.
That would be such a mess. I'm there for it, though.
I want a Netflix spinoff.
Yes.
Yeah, total disaster. I feel like she is a walking reason to go to therapy, but I want to know why. So I'm going to bring this one up because we talked about it a little bit before, and I just talked about April. But in female representation, we have Alopex, who isn't one race or another particularly. She's a species, I guess. How important is it not only to have female representation, but to have diverse female representation? We're talking a little bit about, how fans reacted to Megan Fox, but I think Megan Fox got off easy compared to the Rise version of April and compared to the Mutagen Mayhem version of April. And I know some of you have people in your lives that seeing diversity made an impact. And I would love it if we could open that one up. I was going to say, Anya, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I'll start with, actually, Mutant Mayhem April is my favorite April. I just want to hang out with her. She seems super cool. But I personally, I was raised in Hawaii. So I have kind of a different perspective on things. I definitely was the minority race where I grew up. And so I can appreciate from the other side, now living on the mainland where I might be a part of the majority. It's important. It's important to see people who look like you, who talk like you, but it's also important to see people who don't look like you and don't talk like you and don't think like you. It's both sides. So, for Caucasian children, I think it's important to see representation of other races on the screen, and for other races, it's important to see their representation on the screen. I think the character depth is what matters. And I think the fact that people were immediately just dismissing it because there was a race change, to me, that says enough about those fans that they're not willing to give that story an opportunity. But I think that, I forget which one of y'all shared a story, and I would love to hear it again because it was really touching about how that personally affected a friend of yours.
That was Amanda. So
okay,
take it away.
Yes, take it away, Amanda.
Yeah, I have a group of best friends. They like Ninja Turtles. They don't love them like I do, but they're all women my age, and they've gone to all the Bayverse movies with me. They went to Mutant Mayhem with me when it came out, and my friend showed up at my house on Halloween, didn't tell me, and she's a Black woman, and she was dressed up as Mutant Mayhem April. And it was great. She had the T-shirt she made, and I had no idea. I squeed when she came up my driveway, and I know she never would have done that if April wasn't Black. And it was amazing to see her have that opportunity. I don't know. It makes me so upset when people say, I'm not racist, but you see it all the time in the community, and I don't know why in this world where turtles got mutated by ooze, why April's race is so significant and why people hold on to that so tightly. If it's not racism, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty unrelenting when it comes to the fandom on that point. So I think the diversity is so important. We're even seeing diversity in sexual preference in the IDW comics. And there was the blow up in Mutant Mayhem where people thought Splinter was gay for a hot second. And people wrote off that movie so fast just because of that. And sometimes the trash takes itself out,
I love that. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think it goes even, I think if we really dig, it goes even beyond that. I'm someone who struggled with, body dysmorphia and all of that my whole entire life. It's never going to be figured out. But I think even looking beyond the race, because you can see a change between Rise April and Mutant Mayhem April. She's a plus size character, and I think that's fantastic because that's a whole nother level of inclusion, and making people feel represented. And not only that, but she is the love of Leo's life. Like, he sees her as this incredible, beautiful, strong woman, and it's like, yes, there we go. That's it. It was just a really reaffirming thing, even beyond racial inclusion. I just love the way that this iteration continues pulling the franchise forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're both so right. Like when I heard Amanda saying, if it's not racism, what is it? And people saying, I'm not racist, but it's like when you give an apology and you say, I'm sorry, but whatever comes next is probably not a good idea to say. So I really agree with both of you. And we're hitting two birds with one stone here, where we talk about representation, not only race, but body type, body size, and just being inclusive and making everybody equal. I thought that was really important. And I remember being a kid, it's a weird thing to talk about, but I'm very white presenting, but I come from an Arabic family. And I remember not being able to identify with a lot of characters, whether they were in comic books or whether they were on television, because the superhero women were blonde with blue eyes and they had these to die for bodies. And then I'm more like a hobbit. I'm, squat, dark-haired Arabic child. So I remember that I was in love with Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. And when I saw her, I felt more like, okay, there's somebody I relate to more. So I think it's a really important thing for children and adults to be able to see themselves in characters, especially ones with admirable qualities, because then you think, well, I too am like that, or I too am beautiful, like Anya was saying, because we have these negative stereotypes of women where everybody is photoshopped. You don't know what they actually look like. And it affects us at such a young age. There are so many studies that show girls as young as 8 start having body dysmorphia and eating disorders. So I think we're really onto something there. And by including every single female type, we're making progress, especially when now we talk about sexual preference. I won't get too political, but in Alberta, they're passing laws preventing transgender women to compete in regular sports with women. It's very scary and jarring. So I'm happy that in my spare time, my safe place is the comic book world of Tmnt, where you literally can be anybody and be accepted, and there is a place for you, especially when we talk about Mutant Town. Nobody is any particular race. They're all different species. And I think it's kind of nice. Like if we took race and gender out of life, what would we be left with? And I think that is it's an interesting statement for TMNT, for the comic in Mutant Town, and for all the different directions they've pulled April in. And I think it's incredibly positive. So it's hard to shut out the haters sometimes, but like you said, Amanda, the trash will take itself out. Anybody want to add anything, or should I jump into the next one?
I have a quick thing, because it doesn't necessarily circle back to women, but it circles back to just the negativity. As a Donatello fan, I feel like I've had to come to the defense for Micah Abbey a lot. There have been a lot of people who did not like his voice acting for Donatello in Mutant Mayhem because his voice was too high. Why did they cast such a young kid? And I feel like I constantly had to come back to the forums and be like, this kid's 15. He's 15. Not every 15-year-old sounds exactly the same. And it was the first time that the turtles were voiced by teenagers. And I thought that he did a fantastic job. And I grew up, and I still know, kids who have different voices at different ages. And so it's just crazy that it's not even so much about race or size. It's just different. Anytime something's different, people are uncomfortable with that change.
And that's an interesting one, because the voice being too high is leading towards saying it's effeminate.
Sure.
And even if it was, who really cares? And think about all the poor young boys who are going through puberty and are dealing with voices cracking and going up and down. And what judgment do they face?
Yeah, I feel like obviously I'm not a young 15-year-old boy, but it's one of those moments where I'm like, man, if that was what I was going through and I saw that normalized on the screen, that would feel great. That would feel reassuring until you read the comments. And I feel like I've constantly had to come to his defense and just be like, I think he did a great job. I'm excited to see where it goes, because he's only going to get older. His voice is probably going to change. And even if he doesn't, it's adorable. So it's just kind of one of those things that anytime something is different from what somebody thinks, it's wrong. And that can't be further from the truth.
I think you're also right with Donnie, though, because he's picked on a lot for different voices. I remember, I think it's 2003, that cartoon version. It's Sam Riegel voicing him. And Sam gave him kind of like a more nasally, not super high voice, but it doesn't have like a deep resonance either. Right. So, I feel like voice-wise, Donnie might get picked on a lot for stuff like that. Yeah, people making some judgments about him. So I think it's very interesting. Did you want to add to that, Amanda?
No, that was good.
That's good.
That was good. No, I adored Mutant Mayhem. I think a lot of people hated the movie without ever seeing it, and they just, anything that they didn't like, they heard it in the trailer. Like, I don't like this. I don't like how that looks. I don't like how that sounds. And they just picked it apart before they ever gave it a chance. And Donnie was just another bit of the fallout. So their loss, it was like 97% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. I adored it. I saw it a million times, bought it the moment it came out.
And I love this because we actually saw the movie before making judgments, where I feel like a lot of people said, oh, I don't like Black April. And they never watched to see if the spirit of the character was there. And I think it is alive and kicking in her. So, yeah. I am going to go on to a next question. And I think these were good ones. These were ones Natasha submitted. Sorry, Anya submitted. I'm so silly. I wrote Natasha. Okay. Ooh, she doesn't like Natasha, and I didn't cross that out. Sorry, okay. Anya. So you had asked a good one. And it was, being a female fan in a male-dominated fandom. Many people assume you just like TMNT because you have a 10-year-old son. It has nothing to do with you. It's your son who made you the fan. And then they're pretty much shocked and upset sometimes when you nerd out and you love to talk about this. And they know the franchise themselves, but you kind of still have to prove yourself. Do you want to talk about that aspect of this fandom?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of gatekeeping. I like several fandoms, but I definitely feel like with TMNT the most, you almost have to like answer a series of questions before you're allowed to identify as a fan. And it's frustrating. It's and I try not to get upset, but I'll go to the store and I'll, be buying a couple of TMNT items or something, and the person at the cash register will be, oh, your son's gonna love this. I'm like, no, this is going in my office. Thanks. He's not touching it. But it's one of those things that there's that automatic assumption that as a female, either you only like it because your boyfriend was into it, or your husband's into it, or your kid's into it, or your brother was into it, but it's got to be some male figure in your life that made you get into it. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because I don't have a brother, or my dad wasn't into it. Like, it was just something that I gravitated towards all on my own. And it is hard because, like we were talking about, there's other fandoms that are a little bit, less in age. Like my example that I used was Stranger Things. I love Stranger Things. I don't feel like I've ever had to prove to someone by answering a series of questions that I've actually watched the show, or, know the history of it, or know the facts. It's hard not to take it personal whenever people just assume because you're a female, you're not truly a fan for the right reasons. And it's one of those things that you've just had to overcome. And I definitely feel like whenever you get down into the specifics and talk specifically about fan groups, there's some really toxic ones out there. There's some really unhealthy ones where, just as a female, if you post a photo, it can be the most innocent photo, they will find a way to pick it apart, sexualize it, make you feel really uncomfortable and regret that you ever posted it, or the opposite way, drill you down and make sure that you really deserve to have been able to post just a question or a thought or an opinion. And it's just tough. I don't know if that's necessarily an answer. It's just tough.
It is, and I'm going to interject really quick, because I wish when they did that, you could just pull out your bow staff and show them how dedicated of a fan you are. And then I found out that Amanda has a black belt also. So I'm literally the only one here who can't do martial arts. So I feel like you two have stamps of coolness in the fandom that I don't have. So if anybody's a really awesome fan, the two of you. But I'll let Amanda talk about that too.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have a slightly different experience than Anya. Like I told you guys, I spend way too much time online and in the community groups, and in the Ninja Turtle communities specifically, I don't really encounter a lot of pushback for being a woman. And like my profile picture and my name is very like female presenting, so that's not a question. People argue with me all the time, but that's because I'm like, yeah, I like the Michael Bay movies. Yeah, I like Mutant Mayhem. So I think they're coming at me just for my opinion. But I don't feel like I ever get pushback just for being a woman. However, in general comic book forums, or like IGN or nerd places, that's where I get it for being a woman. And if someone wants to quiz me on Ninja Turtles, I'm like, bring it. Like, go ahead, quiz me, because I'll whoop your ass. I know more than you, I guarantee it. So,
and you have a black belt.
Oh, that too. But I see it online. In real life, I don't have a kid, so no one's gonna see like my little boy in the shopping cart and assume it's for them or anything like that. But I don't know. I think um, I just I give zero fucks about if someone wants to judge me on my fandoms, and if someone wants to come at me for them, they're just gonna get like a blank slate. Like I don't care what you think. Like I like Ninja Turtles. I like Lord of the Rings. I'm a K-pop stan. There's nothing you could say to me that's gonna faze me at this point. So like, but I don't really encounter that much of it except online, and it's ugly, but I can just kind of walk away too. So
I
just
love
a
that
little
you just
different.
don't care. I
Yeah.
Yeah,
love
I'm feeling rap energy and I love it.
Yeah, it's major. It's like you just flipped a sigh at somebody. I love it.
Yes.
I love that about you.
Yeah.
I know for me personally, I still feel the need to prove myself. So if somebody comes at me, I'm not half as raff as you, and I'm not like, whatever, go away. For me, I don't know why I get a little insulted by it. I just feel like I have to take a stand and explain myself. And I feel like I'm more accepted in two possible versions of a Ninja Turtles fan or a comic book fan. The one is if I do sexy cosplay for me, then it's fine. And I feel like that's kind of the objectified fan that some people are okay with. And then there's the you have to be a mega nerd and know more than me fan. So if I don't know every date something was published or, Kevin Eastman's entire life story, I'm not as much of a fan. I think that was the fact checking gatekeeping that Anya was talking about. And I saw that a lot when I used to go buy comic books because the pull was in my name. I had a box number. And every time I went in, it was very awkward at this particular shop. I know they are not all like this, but this one in particular was strange. And they would pull out things that did not belong to me. No hate to Peter Parker, but I didn't buy Spider-Man comics. And they'd be lumped in there, or there'd be like Catwoman things, and I'm not a Catwoman collector, and I'd be missing numbers of my Tmnt pull. So let's say it was I'm just making things up, but let's say it was number 24, 25, and then I get 27. And every time I would have to point out that I could count, there was one missing, and that, yes, I would very much like to have it. And they still treated me like this was for my boyfriend and I was picking it up for him. And it drove me insane because it was under my name. I paid for them. I didn't even come in with children. So they didn't know if I was married, had kids. Who else could it be for? And then there was another store in the same city, and they had an almost all male staff, and they were phenomenal. They did not treat me like this. I'm not saying all men do this. They clearly did not. But they did have a female assistant manager. She always made sure my stuff was there. If a number was missing, she would try to find it for me. I never felt like the wool was being pulled over my eyes, or I felt like I was picking this up for somebody else. And she would often make recommendations. So things I didn't know were out. So if it was a TMNT with something else like Archie or Batman, she'd put them aside for me. So I think it's not necessarily a gender thing. I think people's opinions and the way they view comics will shape how they treat other people in that fandom. So we've seen that some of them are very toxic and some of them are all inclusive and just want to have more fans. And I think those are the really wonderful ones that you enjoy meeting. Like you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we've definitely cultivated spaces online where you're going to get the more tolerant groups. And, the purveyor of this podcast, Justin, has a great one. And it's such a wonderful spot because, they just shut down any of that baloney right away. And so many of the other groups between Rise and Mutant Mayhem, the rampant racism and misogyny, it just got to be a really ugly place. And I left a lot of them during Rise and Mutant Mayhem because I was just like, I don't want to be in this group anymore. So, but there are great spots online still, good communities.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's sad when your fandom is affected by that, right? It's so nice to be able to go in those safe spaces and just let it all out and all the reasons you love something. And that's what draws us there in the first place. I don't know too many people who create, let's say, Facebook pages just to hate something. And if they do, well, okay, that's fair. That's not why the most of us are fans. We don't become fans because we avidly hate something so much that we cluster around it to hate. So, yeah. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
It's all right. Passion.
Since we're not very afraid of controversy, I loved this question that Anya submitted. She said that in the Tmnt franchise, a lot of people have a nostalgic connection to the earlier films, and they tend to hate Bayverse quite a bit. And we touched on that a bit with Megan Fox's April. But I guess I want to know, why do we love Bayverse? Because I know all of us do. And maybe what we don't particularly love about the original 90s franchise. I was going to say, Amanda, would you like to run with that?
I do love the original 1990 movie. I still watch it pretty regularly. The rest of them, take it or leave it. I'll watch it like once a year and eat some popcorn. You know, they're fun. But I do think a lot of the deep love of it is rooted in nostalgia and this kind of blindness and unacceptance for anything moving forward. Um, the suits, people want that again, you know, and I'm like, no, we can't do that anymore. It's going to look ridiculous if they try to do that again. I don't know if CGI is the answer, but I don't think we can do the suits again. So I will defend the 1990s movie. I think it's beautiful, emotional. There's so many good things about it. I do love the Michael Bay movies, and I watch them all the time, especially the
Say it
first
loud
one.
and proud. I want to hear it.
You know, I say it online all the time when people hate them like they came out last week.
Yes.
Still, all the time. And I am really curious why the three of us, why we like them. And if it has anything to do with us being women. I had no issues with Megan Fox as April. I liked her portrayal. I wasn't like in love with it, but I liked it. I didn't have a problem with them being tanky, you know, they were all big and muscle bound, and I was cool with that. Um, I I don't love Casey's portrayal. I think that was the one thing that those movies didn't do very well. Um, but the Bebop and Rocksteady was like amazing. My friend and I go, my man, to each other all the time. So, um, yeah. So I can respect people's love of the old movies. Just don't let it blind you to the good stuff moving forward. And the new stuff doesn't replace or take away the old stuff. You can still go back and watch it and enjoy it. Just let new stuff come out. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. So,
Yes, that's
and
all of that. Yes, like that's the key right there, is that those movies, they're not going anywhere. And thanks to modern technology, you can watch it pretty much any which way, even if you don't have a VHS player anymore. Like they're never going to go away, but you can still enjoy the new stuff. And just, I feel like, and I don't ever want to say that they're not a true fan, but I feel like if you're a true fan, you would just be excited to see your franchise carrying on, even if it isn't your cup of tea. It's just exciting to see new fans, whether they're children or whether they're adults who maybe weren't exposed to TMNT as a kid or didn't think that they liked it as a kid or whatever. Just new people falling in love with the thing that you're in love with should excite you. Because again, you can always go back to whatever you find comfortable, whether you find the 1990 movie or the 80s cartoons, or maybe you only like the comics. It's whatever it is that's still there. But I differ from Amanda in the sense that the 90s movies, I mean, I was born in 89, so I'm a very late 80s baby, barely made it, but I'm so glad I did. So for me, I was more the cartoons, like that was my thing. The movies, they just to me, they're a little painful to watch, but I understand the nostalgia factor. I understand, that was the original. It was groundbreaking for its time, and that was the first time that you saw these characters come to life. So I can understand that magic. But like Amanda said, the people who want to go back to the suits, like, unless we just really, really, really have some crazy development in suit technology that I'm not aware of, I'm on team CGI. I think that CGI has come a long way even since Bayverse. I think we could do better. But I also don't think that the Bayverse movies were bad. I actually really enjoyed them. I enjoyed most of the characters. And it's funny that you mentioned Casey, because that's actually one of my favorite Casey iterations. I actually really enjoyed him because it didn't seem like a trope. Like, I don't know. I don't want to go too far in the weeds there, but I actually really did enjoy that. And I think I do question if we like the Bayverse because we're women, because my husband doesn't like those movies at all. And I don't know that I know too many male fans who enjoy them. So I would love to just deep dive into that sometime in the future and really try to understand the psychology of why people feel so strongly one way or the other on those movies, because I love watching them. They are my go-to.
I wish we could do a survey on that to see, like,
Yes.
what is the, like, if you're male or female or non-binary, do you like Michael Bay? That's like a very important TMNT question.
We can figure this out. We should do this. Yeah.
We should ask Justin for a survey on his Facebook page so we can look at some numbers and analyze them.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting one, though. I remember being a child and I was a major Jim Henson fan. A weird thing about me at one point, I've wanted to be so many things in my life, but one of them was I thought it'd be so cool to be a puppeteer for the Jim Henson workshop. And I thought it'd be great. And I remember the first Turtles movie came out and I went to go see this. I think it was for a birthday party and we even had pizza because at the time a lot of pizza companies would team up for ads about Ninja Turtles, and it was awesome. And I was just amazed. I thought it was so wonderful. And as an adult, I still don't hate that first one because I do feel there's a lot of grittiness in it that comes out of the comic. I think about Casey and Raph fighting, and I think in any reiteration, that Northampton story arc is one of my favorites, where they get out of the sewers and they go to that rundown farmhouse and we see all these different parts of them coming out now that they're out of comfort zones. They've lost in a lot of cases. They don't know what that feels like, right? I always thought it was just a really great story arc, and that was the first time I was introduced to it, and it resonated with me. It stayed in my mind, and I thought about, the whole bathtub scene where, they're looking over a fallen brother and hoping that he'll come back. That emotionally triggered me as a child. Yeah. And then I loved Bayverse so much because I felt like more than that in the second movie, which I thought personally it's not a favorite of mine. Parents complain, so you see the turtles pulling out sausage links, you see them using towels. So that was definitely, they weren't allowed to use their weapons in that one. I won't go into all the things I don't like about that, but I find the foot very non-threatening because they are in a junkyard now. And going with that, you see Shredder's helmet in that one being so big all the time on the poor actor that he looks like Rick Moranis in Spaceballs a little bit. So he just, whenever I see him, I think Lone Star, the whole jam bit. So I don't love it. I do find the turtles are so endearing in the Michael Bay one, where they get put in the hushy and that whole scene right before. It's like, yeah, that's everybody and their siblings pretending they didn't just sneak out or do something they weren't supposed to. They're very fast action paced movies. And I feel some of the comics, you have I can't remember which issue, of course, because I should have written that down, but didn't. You have like a birthday party and then everybody's dying. Like some of them are just, whew, you're reading and it's just battles and you're going, whoa. And you have other ones that are more about character development and a storyline. So I don't even hate them for that. And I think that was our best version we've ever seen on screen of Bebop and Rocksteady. I do not like the Karai version on in that. But other than that, I thought Baxter Stockman even was a fantastic character. I didn't mind Megan Fox. I think she pulled all of the quintessential April O'Neil traits out of a bag. Even just the sequence where I know it's very sexy and I don't even care about that. I think April was always attractive, where she goes through a crowd and she's changing outfits and ends up as a schoolgirl. I thought I believe that. I don't see why not. To me, that's a very gutsy April thing to do. Whether it would happen in real life or not with camera editing, maybe not. Different question.
Hi, this is Adam, aka Casey Jones from Casey Jones Livewire, and you're listening to Epic Tales from the Sewers. Time for a knuckle sandwich, punk.
But I think they're so enjoyable. And the way they work as a group it's a really great dynamic that I believe that universe entirely, where in the other movies, I believe pieces of those universes instead of them as a whole. So I think they're a very accurate representation of the comic book. Even if they don't follow the storyline precisely, I think they're very good representations. And it's funny that we talk about Casey, because that was the only other character than Karai I didn't like as much in Bayverse. I think it's because I'm a sucker for the original 1990s of Casey, who had like dark, almost greasy hair, taking out his hockey stick, and that was more the spirit of Casey to me, rather than the very clean-cut version we get, who has ambitions of being a detective, which I was like, well, that's interesting. Maybe this is like more grown-up Casey, but I've just never seen that. But I'm willing to go there too, because we are always talking about things evolving, as we did. We were kids once, now we're not. So maybe Casey does develop dreams that were part of law enforcement. When I was growing up, he was running away from law enforcement. Maybe this grown-up version thinks, there's a fine line between being a criminal and a cop, and he wants to be on the other side. So I don't know. I personally love Bayverse. I love what they did with the Turtles song at the end. Before this podcast, I was jamming out to it. I was like, yeah! So yeah, I do love Bayverse quite a bit. I'm down for Megan Fox.
I just want to get to the bottom of and I feel like even when I ask people, why don't you like it? I have yet to hear like a really concrete, this is why I don't like it. It's just, I don't. I'm like, okay.
The one thing that I hear that I just don't understand is they say that the turtles weren't represented, like they were out of character. And I just don't see that at all. Some of the other characters, sure, but not the turtles. I thought they were spot on. And where they were dialed up a little bit, like I liked Leo getting cranky. I liked that he was like, I'm in charge, deal with it. And I'm like, he's a teenager. That checks out.
Well, wouldn't you also do that if you kind of were always made to be responsible and now everybody's challenging you? I'd be like, really? Now? It's been okay for years, but now? I think that's often his response. And sorry that I'm going all over with this, but there's a really good scene where we have Leo and Donnie, who are we'll say like they're the planners in the family, right? They know that the other two react emotionally. And they're talking about, they could actually maybe become human with this mutagen. And you see that scene where, Donnie Donnie does it. He puts it over his hand and you see his hand kind of change for a minute. And they're debating whether or not telling the others. Ultimately, not telling them does cause an emotional blow up. But if you were a teenager handling something like this, I think that was like a very important moment in that movie, where we talk about all the action, but there were these little gems where you saw things. And if you put yourselves in their shoes and you took away 10, 20 years of your own life experience because they are so young, man, they did really well for such young beings trying to make serious decisions.
Yeah. And I think there's so many gems. Like I could deep dive. I just want to put a pin in it and we'll save this for the future. But there's so many little moments in Bayverse, and I think Mutant Mayhem too, where there's facial expressions or there's just one little line. And I just think that is so much deeper than I've seen any other iteration on screen. And I live for those moments. And maybe it's because I've watched these things 100 times, but it's those little glances in the background or those little comments that you don't catch unless you've got the closed captions on. And it's like, that's what I'm here for. Those little things that make it feel real, that these are real facial expressions that I would make looking at someone if I felt that way, or little comments that I would say snidely in the background. And I just love that attention to detail in those movies.
Well, even them being beefy, they are mutant turtles. And if we go by that and we look at, if we ping all over the TMNT universe and we look at Last Ronin, Mikey is practically indestructible at this stage in his life because he keeps attributing it to his mutation advancing, right? So I don't know where we would have, what is even a proportionate mutant turtle who has been practicing ninjutsu their entire life. I would like to see what somebody thinks would be appropriate versus commenting that they're too meaty or beefy, right?
And on that, I would argue that the same people, in theory, I'm just guessing here, the same people who would say that the Bayverse were too beefy are probably the same people who are going to say Leo and Nani and Mikey and Rise are too scrawny. Because I've heard that side too. What happened to our turtles? Why do they look like scrawny little turtles? And it's like, what do you want?
It's like you can't win, right?
You
so
can't.
I think Michael Bay has a lot of Amanda attitude where he's just like, I don't care what you think. This is what I did, and I'm going to stick by it. So, I mean, I love those movies so much. And now, speaking of like loving things, I'm just going to go into our TMNT collections because those are so much fun. So does everybody have like a favorite item they own?
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Anya.
So I don't have mine with me. I was planning on doing this in my office, but I didn't make it up there due to the weather. But I have a Donnie statue or figure that I had custom made for me from a guy in Tennessee, and it's based off of the drawing. I think it's Donnie's Demise. I forget it off the top of my head, but it's just really moving. It's basically Donnie bowing in front of his bow, and he's got his brother's mask flying from it, and it's just an iteration where he's kind of the last Ronin. It's not the last Ronin. I know that's Mikey, but it's this alternate path, and I love it. The attention to detail that he put into it, I think it's beautiful. But my personal favorite thing is my bow. It connects me to my favorite character, and I've got his stickers all over it. Comics and all of that stuff, I love to collect them and keep them, but the bow I feel like it transcends. It actually puts me into that universe for a time.
And I feel bad that nobody can see it today. We'll have to post a picture of it, I think, later on, because I know when I saw it, in my head, it just cemented all of these Donnie qualities to you. And I was like, that's my Donnie friend. Yeah, it made.
Thank you.
I don't know why. It was just like, even though you've said it, you holding it, just kind of, that was it.
It gives me a respect for them. I mean, it's one of those things that I think we take for granted, that they just know how to do this, and it's having to learn this stuff. I mean, it's not easy. And I know we haven't really talked about origin stories and stuff, but it does make me appreciate the IDW origin story the most, because it gives a little bit of depth that they learned this in a past life and carried it over into this life. And so, because I feel like I'm going to spend the rest of my life learning it just to get even decent at it. So how do these people have these superhuman, abilities to do this? And it makes more sense if, well, this isn't their first lifetime learning this. They've learned this before, but that's a whole nother story.
You have to give
Amanda, what do you have?
Because I was going to say,
Thank
you get to practice all day. You don't.
Thank you. That's true. That is true. They don't have jobs.
Sorry, Amanda. No, go ahead.
You just need some ooze, Anya. You need
That's
some
true.
ooze.
Let me know when you find some.
Ooze. I don't have an extensive collection. I like artwork. You can see I've got some Ulea, Dark Leo, and Freddie Williams over here autographed. I have some comics that I collect, like my favorite covers. I was talking extensively about Jenica earlier. I haven't framed it yet, but I bought an extra issue where she's putting eyeliner on so that I can break it down and frame it like a montage, because it's such a stereotypically female thing to do. You know, here's a Ninja Turtle putting on eyeliner to go out, and I just loved it. So I love the artwork. Um, I have like a couple of NECAs and stuff like that, but nothing too much. And you know, my plushies, my guy. I'm wearing a dress I made. I'm a seamstress and a kind of an ex-cosplayer that's transitioned into fashion just so I can wear it somewhere. And it also connects me to my favorite turtle. So you can't really see, but it's lined in red. I got my red headband on. It's like a little 50s vintage pinup kind of thing. And it's fun to wear to conventions and stuff, and people like it. So, or to wear the movies. I wore it to the second Bayverse movie and Mutant Mayhem and everything else. So
Oh, that's so awesome. You have beautiful artwork behind you. Are you able to show us any of them?
yeah, I love this. Everyone loves Dark Leo, so that's Lulea. She does absolutely gorgeous stuff. Um, and then if Sophie Campbell ever got a store, I would buy everything she ever put out. So yeah.
Yeah, you and me both. That'd be amazing. So I had to think about this one myself because, as you can see, I have more toys than my children. But I think my favorite thing is I wear it all the time because it is a tattoo, and I'm not sure I can even show it on a screen. But I do have a turtle sleeve because I do have 3 kiddos. And we each have a different favorite turtle. So including myself, we cover all of them. I don't have Jenica on there yet. That's something I would like to add. But this way I have my turtles with me every day, reminding me of the qualities I would like to embody if I don't necessarily have them that day, depending which turtle I'm looking at more. And it is a reminder of my kids and all the really cool things they've learned about turtles with me. We've gone through a few iterations together. We've seen I believe it was 2012 Turtles on Netflix together, and then Rise came out, and my son is a huge Rise fan. So I think eventually there will end up being different iterations of Turtles all over on the other arm. So that would be a cool one to do. But that is my favorite thing. I guess it's not technically Turtles merch, but I do really love it. And I love collecting plushies and Funko Pops, and I just love everything Turtles. Even if I find them at a garage sale and one is missing a leg, I'll be like, that's okay. You're the turtle nobody wanted. Something happened to you. Let's make up what it was. Was it a Mouser? Was it Shredder? So those are a lot of fun for me. And we have a giant turtle layer, which is something I wanted as a child and never got, for Mutagen Mayhem. That's in my son's room. That one's his, but I play with it.
That's
so
awesome.
It's a lot of favorite things, right? I ended up being like in Sound of Music where she's listing all of her favorite things. But here there was no mittens and stuff like that.
I'm sure there's turtle mittens out there somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't have them. So I would really like to find them. I got a very cool Epic Shells toque once. So I have a hat, but no mittens. And the hat, consequently, is a very cool Mikey orange, in my opinion.
Very cool.
Yeah. So those are my favorite things. I know we had so many other questions, but I think a fun thing that we prepared was we were talking about like fantasy football leagues and stuff like that. And because we talk about all these iterations, we had homework, and the homework was to put what your favorite version of any particular character was. So I think Anya shared hers online. So I'm cheating. I know what hers already is.
I misunderstood the assignment.
Yeah, I knew which Casey you liked already. So I thought it was funny when we were talking about it. Amanda was saying she wasn't fond of that Casey, and I thought, ooh, Anya has things to say about that.
I do have feelings.
We all have feelings. So I mean, I'll let you guys pick. Who wants to go first and share their list?
Go ahead, Anya. You already spoiled it, so go
I
ahead.
I should have given warnings.
I spilled the beans prematurely. I'm glad I did though, because now I've got it all written down. So I didn't know how deep we were diving into the characters, if we were just going to do, the main four turtles, or how deep we wanted to go. And I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack, especially from older fans, because I really love the newer iterations. Like they just speak to me differently, I guess. I'll talk to other people my age and they just feel differently, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I definitely feel like
we'll let Amanda loose on them.
Okay, there we go. So for me, I actually really enjoyed Leo in Mutant Mayhem. I thought that it was a very genuine Leo. Sometimes it feels too forced that he is the leader, and I think he had to kind of come into that role. So I think what I'm most excited about is seeing him develop in that. I'm going to save Donnie for last because he's my boy. Raph, Mikey, and Splinter, I all love the 2K12. I think that the 2K12 Splinter might possibly be unbeatable. Absolutely love him in that. Mikey and Raph. Now, I'm also a Lord of the Rings fan. I have a huge soft spot in my heart for Sean Astin, and I think he did a phenomenal Raph. Like that, he did great. I love that. April, I've already said it, Mutant Mayhem. That I just really want to be her friend. Like she just, from the moment I saw her on the screen, I'm like, that is a cool chick and I want to hang out with her. And I've never really felt that about the other Aprils. I've never not liked her, but I've never been like, that could be my best friend. And I need April in real life. Casey, Bayverse. Maybe I'm the only one. I don't know. I found him to be very endearing, and I know that it was a different version of Casey than we've seen, but kind of like you alluded to, like I know a lot of people personally. So I work in municipal government. I know a lot of people who are police officers, and I know a lot of them come from, I was on the wrong side of the law, and rather than going into adulthood and trying to just keep pushing it away, I wanted to be a part of making it better. And I feel like that's a relatable story for him. I don't know that is the Casey story in every iteration, but for Bayverse, I thought that fit, and I just really enjoyed him as a character. I didn't go further than that though, so if you guys add more characters, I can jump back in. Oh, and Donnie, sorry. Donnie, I'm kind of torn because my brain loves Donnie in IDW. I think that he's perfection in that. And I'm really excited to see where this is going, because I feel like he has, in so many of the older iterations, I feel like Donnie was a lesser character, or just not as appreciated as some of the other brothers. And I feel like in IDW, he really gets to shine, and my heart has been broken and excited. I felt every single emotion because of Donnie. Like I literally was throwing comics and screaming and crying and then getting really excited. It's been a journey, but my heart loves Rise Donnie. I know Rise is not everybody's cup of tea, but Rise Donnie is just it's amazing. He's mad, he's a genius, he's funny, he's witty, he's snappy, he's sassy. Everything that he's not in so many other iterations, we really get to see this very different take on him, and I'm here for it. So, kind of two favorites in that one.
I love those. Those are good.
All right, what you got?
I just wanted to say, like, I wasn't a big fan of Rise, but I did like Leo and Donnie's interpretations the best. They were sassy and funny,
They're
and
so fun.
Yeah, I gravitate towards humor and
Mm-hmm.
shows, and I did enjoy. I laughed a lot. Like I can't say I didn't. So, okay. All right. I have my list. I did basically what you did too. Okay. So, for Leo, we talked about how he can kind of be a little bit a little boring, right? Just a little boring.
Oh,
If I don't get if I don't get flack for this somewhere, I'm not doing it right. So, okay. So, but he's a lawful good character, right? And he's not like a chaos goblin. So he's going to be like a little bit dull. So I have to go with IDW Leo because he's a nuanced character and you need that time to like fully develop his character. There's the Dark Leo arc that everyone loves. My favorite comic of all time is the Macro series with Leo, which is the most beautiful story ever. So IDW Leo all the way. I'm going to save Raph for last. I'm with Anya, Mikey, 2012, Nickelodeon. Um, I slept on that show for way too long. The animation put me off. I was one of the haters, and I was like, I'm not going to watch that. And then my friend was like, watch 2 or 3 episodes, and if you don't like it, we don't have to come back to it. And I tried it, and Mikey was the one that sold me on it because he was so funny. I loved him and the show like 2 episodes in right away. But 2012 Mikey, because he's sweet and he's cute and he's got those freckles and he's just adorable. For Donatello, I'm going to go the original Nintendo game because he could hit anything with his bow, like anywhere.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah,
That's
I didn't either.
smart.
I had to think about Donatello for a long time, but my real answer is IDW. Again, nuanced character. I love his fear of the future and how everything he does is to change the future. His near-death scene, I mean, it was essentially a death scene, was so gruesome and so traumatizing for him and for us, and how that has shaped so many of his decisions going forward. It's such a great ongoing story arc that it's just really, really compelling. So IDW, Donnie. Raph, 1990s movie Raph. This is my 12-year-old coming out, I think. He was at his most Raphist, like, I mean, he caused so much trouble. He's angry and crying, and I don't know. I loved him then. I love him now still. And for that reason, for my Casey, it's also 1990s because you got to keep them together. And oh, okay, here's my admission. So I told you guys I didn't love Last Ronin. I feel like I have to whisper that, right? So I went back and I reread the whole thing.
Yay!
I did. It's still not my favorite, but my favorite April of all time, I've got to say Last Ronin, specifically April. I really liked the battle-hardened, like Sarah Connor, kind of thing she had going on. That was my favorite April of all time. So I think that's everybody. It's a lot of IDW.
What about Splinter?
Oh, 2012.
Okay.
You said, like, I think he's the perfect combination of dad and sensei.
Yes.
He's not too hard, he's not too soft, he's not crazy over the top. So yeah, 2012. And he's animated so beautifully. Like you want to pet his fur, So, but then for my fantasy team, I said like Jenica, Venus, Alapex, you need, the girl power. I want Ray Fillet for the singing.
Oh, nice.
I was going to do it, but I'm not going to do it.
I can't. No. Ice Cream Kitty and Bishop, just to like make things crazy. So that's it. That's all I got.
That's all you got? I think it's awesome.
That's all I got.
I love it. So my list, okay, where will I start with this one? So Casey Jones, because that was the one we go back and forth with. So if Amanda's favorite Raph, because he was the Raphiest ever, and that was the 1990s movie, because I felt this was very much street Casey, who used to play hockey on the street, had a crime-involved father, and I just buy him completely like that. I buy that live version as what I see and hear when I read the comic book, even today. So maybe it influenced me too much as a child, but that was my favorite Casey. I definitely think for Splinter, it's hard for me to decide between that live action 1990s movie and the 2012, because we get to see so much more of Splinter there. We do get to see how loving and nurturing he is, and helping them with failures and success too, and humbling them even when they do have success, so they're not cocky the next time and get hurt. And that's what I really liked about that cartoon version of him. I do really like the 2003 Raph, because if we talk about the Raffiest, I feel like he was very sarcastic, very tough. You saw nice little moments with him. I can't remember which episode, of course, or what the kid was called. But in this episode, he ends up blind, and he's taking care of a child, and they end up in some trouble. So I thought it interestingly had a lot of character development in that series for Raph. And I was there for that, where they took, he's this rude, crude attitude, and we saw where it could translate into being protective, how it could translate into so many different things. So for some reason, I love that Raph. For Donnie, I think for me, it is the IDW. Again, because of character development, I love that he had that relationship with Harold, where it was, I feel like Donnie always wants to connect with people, but he's too cerebral in a lot of ways. He's too full of big ideas, and maybe people just can't ping around and follow him. If they did, they would find that he's genuinely like a very kind person, and he's very creative, but we don't always see that. And he tried so hard with Harold, and they made horrible mistakes. They made Metalhead, which was just a disaster. Again, I feel like making Metalhead was trying to connect it. So it was, to me, it was almost like making Frankenstein. Or I think about Edward Scissorhands and the old inventor trying to make a type of son that he could connect with. And it didn't work out. But there's so much I could talk about IDW Donnie, because I thought it was so fascinating that we always know he's the smart one, he's a genius. But here he was literally trying to crawl out of his head all the time, and does become obsessed with the future and stuff like that. Donnie, for me, I agree that my favorite was Mutagen Mayhem. Not Donnie, sorry, Leo. Like, what are you talking about? I can't read my own writing. I have to take notes.
Hey, I'm okay to talk about Donnie.
Yeah, we can. But it was a really bad scrawl, and I'm like, oh, good thing I color coded that, and that one's blue. So we know that's Leo. Oops. Just because we don't always get to see, I think, like we were talking about, he's kind of a boring character sometimes as the leader, and I think we see him sometimes as an authority figure. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not wonderful with authority figures, especially if they're a brother. I'd be like, why do you get to tell me what to do just because you're the oldest? But you do see him grow into that, and how he became the leader, and that it was organic and made sense. He didn't just wake up and decide he was. And I love that he just falls in love with April so hard. We've seen Donnie do that in the 2012 one with April, and it was a little bit cringy. This one was not cringy. We've seen Mikey crushing on her before in other versions. But this didn't make me kind of think it was gross. This was really sweet. And I thought that was a piece that was missing to him and his leadership. I know we were talking about how Alapex is kind of the softer side of Sears for Raph. I think this is something that was missing for Leo and his leadership, not to always just think along the lines of duty and what his father would like. It's something else. Like, he's fighting for something else now too. And I thought that was really interesting. I think for Mikey, and this is one that makes me feel very vulnerable, because I told somebody once that that Mikey was my favorite. And this gentleman looked at me and said, oh, that just means you're neurodivergent. Every neurodivergent loves Michelangelo. And I felt very outed, and I was very uncomfortable. But when I look at the 2012 version of Mikey, and there's a whole episode where they go into his head and nobody else can figure out what's going on there, I thought, again, I feel very outed about what goes on in my head. Maybe the gentleman who said this to me was correct. And I'm not accusing people who are neurodivergent of having wild and crazy brains. That is not at all what I think. There's just so much going on in that brain. Some of it made complete sense. Some of it was very strange to everybody else, but made sense to him. And I just went, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like sometimes. Very odd and fun. And I think Mikey's a very endearing character, and he has moments in every iteration where he surprises us, like in IDW when he defies Master Splinter and he takes those kids away. And you're like, that is so, you would think that's not like him. But I don't think when we try to pin down who exactly Mikey is, it's very easy. Because we can say that Leo will be very law-abiding. We'll say that Donnie's creative and he's very smart. We'll say that Raph works from an emotional core. But what exactly defines Mikey? For some people, it's humor. For some people, it's spontaneity. And like I said, for me, it's a real care for the people around him. And we see that with the Ice Cream Kitty or Clunk in the IDW. So I don't know. I find if I sit and I try to tell you what exactly I like about this Mikey, or I sit and try to tell you what is it precisely I like about his personality, I feel it's a little bit nebulous, and I'm good with that. I feel like that fits me just fine. And I think this was a really great version of him, where we got to see all the randomness, all the sweetness, all the care, and we got to go inside his brain, which we don't always get to do with any character. So it was interesting, and it's something that I continue to think about with all of the characters, which is why I think we're always coming back to this, like who is our favorite and why. And I promise I'm done with that now because I can keep going. I did have one side note because we were talking about extra characters, right? I thought it was funny how we don't always talk about Usagi Ujimbo. And then we've seen many versions of that character too. And I don't really have a favorite, I guess, but I wanted to see if anybody else did, if he even is on the TMNT radar for most people. But he was kind of like a guest character you'd be so excited to see when I was a kid. And now I feel like we're still excited, but we never really talk about that character.
I sad I actually have him written down on my list and I didn't say it because I just glossed right over it. I love Usagi. I like the Stan Sakai. I didn't finish it, but I did read a few of the actual issues of the series. So I like that one. I'm kind of a weeb, so I just like Japanese things, and I love the style of the art, the gracefulness of the story. So yeah, I really like Usagi. They could do so much with him, and I would be on board for anything. So
yeah, I kind of miss him.
Yeah, I enjoyed him in the 2K12, but I mean, I really haven't explored him much further than that. So I'd be open to more stuff always.
Yeah, and then I think about other characters just briefly. I won't go into this too much. But when we talk about Casey and April, we've met both of Casey and April's families. Like we've met Casey's dad in different ways. And it's interesting because he's never portrayed as a nice person. He's never portrayed as very caring. And then we've met Rachel, oh my gosh, I can't talk today. April's parents. So we know about her mother, and we know more about her dad because he left her that secondhand store. And we know that he was a scientist in IDW too. So I don't know. What do you guys think of those? They're backstory characters, but how do you think they influence main characters? Because we have, Splinter as the Turtle's father. So we always touch on who your parents were in this, but I don't think we give it too much thought.
there was one storyline. Was it IDW? I don't know, where Hun was Casey's dad.
Yeah.
Is that IDW? I
Yeah.
liked that. I know it's kind of like mixing storylines, but I liked it. I thought they did a good job with it. If they had done that elsewhere, I would have been okay with it. I don't know. I don't think I have strong opinions on it. I was just focused on Splinter being a dad. I would have liked to see more of Karai and Shredder's relationship, if anything. Like if we could put more energy towards a relationship, that's what I would like to see. So, and not in like a cartoony way, like a more realistic relationship way. So.
I think for the IDW version, with Hun being Casey's dad, I mean, Casey and Raph have never been my favorite dynamic, but I do enjoy that, subplot in most of the iterations. And I think it brought a lot more depth for me from Casey's perspective, because you could see a lot of, I don't know if envy is the right word, but you can see a lot of, I don't know what the word is, but where Casey just longed for that sense of family that Raph had. And then he would get frustrated at Raph because he's like, dude, you have your brothers, you have your father, and you're here. Like, go be with your family. I'd give anything to be a part of that. And, when he finally becomes a part of that, it just, I feel like that depth was a really good direction that they decided to go. Because even though I've never personally been there, I can imagine that there's a lot of people that can relate to that maybe come from families that are broken and hear other people complaining, and they're like, dude, I'd give anything to be in your shoes. You don't realize what you have. So I think either side that you're on, it can either help to, make you appreciate what you have, or give you hope that maybe one day you'll have that, even if it is creating your own family. I know a lot of people that I've heard firsthand who didn't have strong father figures or anything like that, that whenever they become parents, they're more motivated to be better parents because of what they didn't have. So hopefully, Casey having Hun, that motivates him to be a better person in the future. But that would be my take.
Yeah, I'm sorry I sprung that on you guys, but it's because I was thinking about, what we love about Turtles, and you were mentioning brotherhood, that togetherness, all of these things. And it made me really think a lot about Master Splinter and talking about who our favorite version of Splinter was. And we're all talking about him being this fantastic father. And it made me just think about the other fathers like Shredder, Hun, April's parents. I know her dad has a name. I'm sure some fan will be like, well, don't you remember it's so-and-so? And so does her mother. Right now,
Mr.
she's just
Mrs. O'Neill.
There you go. Mr. and Mrs. O'Neill for everybody. And it's just interesting about a comic so much about family, where these other characters came from. And I think with Alapex, there's not a lot about her family. But again, it's somebody who's kind of on the run. Jenica doesn't really talk about her family very much. So for a comic centered around this family, they're continually adding people to their family, and it's all these other outcasts. And making this list kind of made me think about that a lot. So I appreciate all the feedback on that. I think it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, I love asking people who really genuinely care. And this is why I love talking to you all, but I love asking people not just who their favorite character is, but the iteration, because I think that speaks volumes, that some people love a character and it transcends every iteration, and then others will be like, well, in this iteration I like this, and this, and it tells you a lot about a person when you can break down not just who their character is, but which iteration and why.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that just speaks a lot to, inclusivity again, because there are so many different characters to identify with. They're not all just one type, right?
Yes.
I think it's really awesome. And that's going to lead me to my next question. And it doesn't have to be if you have children, but how, because I know that Anya and I do, and that's a whole thing. But I don't think it excludes other people, because we all know people with kids, or we're somebody's favorite aunt, or, something like that. We're somebody's mentor, we're somebody's friend, even as an adult. I'm wondering how being around children, or having children, or being a great aunt to children affects our fandom, because we want to share it, of course, and they probably bring new things too. And I know Anya was talking about having a 10-year-old son and now having a little mini fan. I don't know if you want to expand on that, like how it either changed your fandom and expanded it, or for Amanda, even doing it with your dog probably doesn't give you all of his opinions, but you do have a group of friends, right? So you're introducing them sometimes to Turtles. I won't put them as children, but they're new fans. So I'm thinking children are our easiest new fans because they're often very open-minded, but friends are also people we bring into this. Like, what have we learned from this?
Go ahead, Anya.
So for me, it was just really exciting. I mean, from the second that I saw the first Mutant Mayhem commercial or a trailer, I was like, "Oh, we're going to see this. I'm excited." Like it just was one of those things that I wasn't there nitpicking the trailer apart. I was just excited to see it back on the screen. Let's go. And my son was of the age that he showed an interest, and we ended up seeing it I think 5 or 6 times in theaters, and it was just super
Oh.
fun because there were days where, like I would just pick him up from school and he'd be like, "Let's go see it." And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" Like there's no reason not to. And it was just really cool to see him get excited about something that I was excited about as a kid, but for a completely different generation. And I guess I enjoy seeing the youngness, the youth brought into it. Like I enjoyed the slang terminology and but at the same time the throwbacks to the older music. It just to me it was a fun like to me Mutant Mayhem was like riding a roller coaster for an hour and a half straight. I just felt like I was smiling the whole time, I was laughing the whole time, I was having a good time. There was some emotional depth to it, but it was a feel good experience. And my son and I've been through a lot. It totally side stories, but it just felt good to have that moment with him. And I think that's the key is that whether it's a child or whether it's another person, if you can just feel good sharing a moment with someone, regardless of what it is, cherish that. And I think as a TMNT fan, that's the key is that if you can find whatever iteration it is that speaks to you, if it's the 1990s movie, go you. But if you can find that and connect with somebody else on it, then that's at the end of the day what matters is that connection and whatever that is to you. But as far as the kids go, like I'm just excited to see this carrying on. And I really do hope that having a new generation buy into it through Rise, through Mutant Mayhem, I hope that that gets us older fans some of the things that we're sitting back and kind of wanting. I know we kind of talked about, whether it's a Netflix series, whether it's a movie or whatever iteration of IDW or Ronin or just remaking some of the older stuff. We want those things. And I definitely am on team. Let's go get more mature stuff out there. But I'm not going to sit back and hate all of the stuff that's more geared towards the kids because I think that helps to carry the franchise along. We can have both. So yeah.
Okay, so I don't have kids, and for whatever reason, my friend group, none of us have children for the most part. So I can live vicariously through like Anya's stories, and I see them online. And I feel the same way. Every new fan, regardless of age, just helps keep the franchise going. And even if I don't like Rise, even if Last Ronin's not my favorite, maybe the next thing that comes out will be. One thing about new fans that just absolutely tickled me was one of my other beloved fandoms is BTS, the K-pop group. The Korean pop group, love them. In Mutant Mayhem, if you recall, they sing one of the BTS songs. So now BTS is canon in the Turtleverse.
Yeah.
That got spoiled on Twitter, or it's like it was in a trailer that day. All of my BTS friends are messaging me going, Amanda, did you see this? All of my turtle friends are messaging me going, Amanda, did you see this? Because like the Venn diagram of BTS fans and turtle fans, there's not a lot of crossover, but there's some, and I'm right in there, But what I saw online were all these BTS fans going, I don't know what a Ninja Turtle is, but I'm going to see this movie. Like so
Yeah.
many comments because they're going to support the group that they love. So I would love to think that, if 100 people went because of that name drop, maybe 10 new Turtle fans were born out of that. So, I'd like to think that we got some new people just because of that crazy reference thrown into this movie. So,
And I absolutely love
so
that. Because I kind of cringe a little asking, about taking our kids and what does it mean? Because it's a very valid choice as a woman not to have kids, or there's other issues where some people can't, or it's so complex and ugly that I hate that I asked it like that. I'm sorry that I did. But my point was, kids are not. I think the excitement whether it's a child or a friend of ours or getting somebody into it, like you're talking about this group, that's just it's so exciting when you can share a fandom and you see people coming into your fandom, and it's so nice and you just want to hug them all and give them all big squishy hugs, even if they're virtual. So I love that story, and that the Venn diagram. I wonder how many other instances there were where somebody who was not a Turtles fan suddenly became one.
Yeah.
Maybe because they were Megan Fox fans or whatever weird thing it is. That is really neat. I love that. Now I have to go look for some of these groups to see what they said about the Turtles movie. Because they were probably very open because they didn't know what Turtles were. And this was their first experience with them.
I'll message some of my groups and be like, so who went and saw the Turtles movies because of this reference? Are you a fan now? Would you like to borrow some comics?
But I think that's what they have in common with children, because they don't have a preconceived notion. For them, they're just as open, where some of us are, like we've mentioned, we're biased because we saw this in the 90s and that's our version of Turtles, right? And we might put our backs up against a new version of Turtles, which would be unfortunate. And I think I'm definitely there for all of these new ones. And my last question, I guess, will be, we've talked about Mutagen Mayhem. We've talked about how it was for kids and it brought in new fans. But let's talk about like the polar opposite of Mutagen Mayhem, which we kind of skirted around a little bit, The Last Ronin. So I feel like this was very much for the older fans who have grown up with the Turtles and maybe now are in life situations where they'd like to consider them in more mature or more serious circumstances. Maybe not. I just want your opinions on like the opposite, on The Last Ronin. Amanda, I know you have some thoughts on this one, so I'm going to let you take it first.
Yeah, I was so excited when it was announced, right? We all were, and I got it the day it dropped, and it ended up just not being for me. I want to say that I like the gritty stuff, but maybe I don't, like I was all excited to read Body Count, and that wasn't really my thing either. So, the story's kind of gritty and the artwork is kind of gritty. And I guess maybe that's just not my thing. I know it fulfilled the desires of so many fans, and I think it just broke a record, right? Like, didn't they say like top selling? So awesome. Yay for Kevin Eastman and everyone involved. I think that's amazing. But it just wasn't my jam. And I actually reread it, like I said, because I thought maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it. And it ultimately just wasn't my favorite thing ever. The second part of it, Lost Years.
The Lost Years, yeah.
Yeah, Lost Years. I like that more. And I love Tmnt, The Next Generation. The kids that are coming out. I really can't wait to see what they do with that. I'm so in. Like, I didn't think I would be, and I am totally invested already. So, but yeah, Lost Ronin wasn't my thing, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be my thing. There's lots of things that are my thing. So,
and you did like Rise.
No.
Don't say that.
I was just teasing you there.
I mean, it had a couple of moments.
Okay, so I'm on the opposite side. I really enjoyed The Last Ronin, and I was surprised because I'm willing to admit that if something's not Donnie focused, and I think that's why I love the IDW comics so much, it's not that I'm not going to like it, but I'm not going to like it as much. And I think that's also why I do enjoy Rise, because I feel like Donnie shines a little bit more in Rise just because he's funny and he's witty and he gets a little bit more screen time. But the Last Ronin, it's very emotional and it's very different. It just from start to finish, it feels very different than any other iteration. I will say it's not my favorite art style. I definitely prefer most of the IDW comics to the Last Ronin. But what I really try to find in the Last Ronin is that sense of perspective, that what does this feel like to have lost everything? I mean, literally, like everything is gone. And I love that moment whenever he's reunited with April and he has some source of hope again. And I didn't even think, are we doing spoiler alerts? I'm assuming everybody's read it.
No, it's been
Okay.
out long enough.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If you
Oops.
haven't read it, it's not our fault.
If you haven't read it, you should have. But it is very dark. It is very different. Michelangelo is not my favorite character, but I do completely understand him as the choice for the Last Ronin. I think there's a lot of depth to why he was selected for that, and it does make sense when you think not even so much about why Mikey is the Last Ronin, but why are the other three not? Because you could see how the other three would get themselves in a situation where they would be the first ones to get killed.
Yeah.
I think one of the most interesting things from The Last Ronin, and I can't remember if we talked about this or if it was in a message or something, but the perspective of whether or not the brothers are in the astral plane or if they're just in his head. And I think that is a very interesting, like, whichever way you perceive that might change the way that you read that story. For me, it's comforting to think the astral plane because it still brings some life to my favorite character and of course for Mikey, his brothers. But I think that does change the perspective on how you interpret the story. And then moving ahead, I love the new Turtles. I love Yi. She's my favorite. But I love all of them. I enjoy that character development. I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I also do really enjoy Casey Marie Jones. I think that was a very unexpected and very creative twist. And I, of course, enjoyed that they introduced another female character for us to get to know and love. But I think that right off the bat, she came out as a very strong character. And I think she's going to do really great things. So I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I agree on those points. I'm gonna jump around a bit here, but before I forget my thoughts on it, we talk about, are they ghosts, like from the astral plane, or if they are, figments of his imagination? Has he gone crazy? I think that's one of the things I found the most interesting about The Last Ronin. I mean, obviously, how each turtle died was traumatic, and that was huge. But I think because they kind of come back, I was thinking about the whole origin story, how they were reincarnated. And I was wondering if this is like a holding room, like a waiting room before you get reincarnated. And it always makes me wonder that if Mikey was not successful, then would he join them in the waiting room and the whole cycle would start again? And that made it make a little bit more sense why it's so critical that Mikey finishes this mission for me when I put these pieces together. Because I think some of us are not firm believers in fate. Like the thought of having your life predestined for you is a bit chafing, where it makes you feel like you have no free will. And I'll be honest, the first time I read it, I was a little bit upset for him. Like, this is what he was destined for. He was destined to come back to suffer and to do this. And now it's all on him. But then when I started thinking about the ghost, so yeah, I was talking about just like the ghosts and the astral plane. And I don't know, I was so excited that it was Mikey. And then I was getting upset for him that this is what he was left to do. But then I was not as upset when I tried to think of it that way. And I might be completely misreading it. I don't know. Who knows? Kevin Eastman, you're welcome to give me a phone call to set me right. That's okay. I'll take that call. And then I always had bets that he would be the last one, because exactly when we try to pin down what are Mikey's characteristics, it's easy to pin down who the others are very easily. It's harder to talk about him. And we can say for certainty, we know why the other ones would go out first. And that's what we were kind of saying. So we know, Raph lost his temper. He obviously went after Karai. This did not end well for once. We've seen how Donnie went out, which to me was the most heartbreaking because he did not want to be there. And it was the most gruesome death to me because of the arrows sticking out all over. For those Lord of the Rings fans, I'm sure you can think of another scene that might have upset you with arrows sticking out all over. So I found it very gruesome. Leo was very sad and he went out with Casey Jones. But I feel like those made absolute sense. They carried out their personalities, their duties to a T. And by sheer dumb luck, Mikey was the last one. That's how I feel. It was by sheer dumb luck. And without them, he is so lost. Like, he spends 3 years gathering mushrooms, and how he was not found before then, I'm not entirely certain. There's a lot to unpack there to say why you like it or why you don't. I like a lot of it. I think the hallmarks of TMNT that we all come to the stories and expect aren't there. Like, we don't have Master Splinter. We have the brothers, but we sort of don't. I think it's a very interesting thing because we see Mikey stealing and feeling bad. It's a very grown-up version of our Turtles. And I think if we don't like it, that's okay. I think sometimes rereading it makes more sense. And I think it's an uncomfortable one that we either love or not love, or that we have to sit with, because it's not the happy ending we would want. And I think that's the truth there. It's not a happy ending. And I think because we love them all so much, we'd like there to be a happy ending. So that's my very long take on this one. I do ultimately like it. I'm interested to see what comes next, though, because I feel like we're hanging, and I still haven't been given the last piece I need to close my last Ronin stories and say, I'm very happy with it now. If that makes sense. I don't know if anybody else feels like that. Astral Plane, can you help us? Please. Give us proof you're real, type thing. So what I was trying to say here is, I don't know if you guys need more from the story before you feel satisfied. If there was more to the story, do you think you'd like it more? Do you think you could close the book and be like, okay, I'm good?
For me, I mean, the book is closed. I think it was satisfactory. I don't have a problem with the story. It's just not what I'm looking for. I agree it was emotional. It just wasn't emotionally fulfilling in the way that I wanted it to be. I don't know. We were talking about, is it the astral plane or not? And I'll try to not make this too long-winded, but something that was bothering me on my second read through was, I was like, man, Raph is so one-dimensional. Is this why I don't like the story? There's no nuance to his character. He's just angry old Raph and nothing else. But then I started looking at the other characters, and I'm like, none of them, except for Mikey, they're all kind of one-dimensional, very, very flat. That's when I started getting the idea that they are aspects of Mikey's personality. I don't think they're ghosts or that they exist in the astral plane. I think they're part of Mikey's psyche, that he is just as a coping mechanism. He's like, my logical brain is, I'm going to call it Donatello. My assertive brain is Leo, and my angry emotional brain is Raph. And that is how I'm going to cope with their deaths. And when I think of something that's like really technologically savvy, I'm going to attribute it to Donatello because it makes me feel better thinking that they're still with me. That's how, like, I, as a reader, reconcile this sort of flat, one-dimensional characters that I was getting from the other ones and how I was perceiving the story.
That's such a good read.
That is.
But I didn't like that. You know what I mean? Like, that was my interpretation, but I didn't love that. But that's how I was interpreting. It's just, they're not there. They're dead. They're long gone. And this is Mikey coping. So
I like that, though, because then he's like compartmentalizing pieces of his personality. And that might be the thing. They really are gone. Like, and I think a lot of us want them to be ghosts because then they're not really gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're facing harder truths than me.
That was deep. Yeah. And I think what you're saying about, like, did we get closure? I mean, I feel like the story is complete. I did enjoy the backstory that the Lost Years gave us, as well as the setup for what we're gonna get from Re-Evolution. But I think that this chapter, the last Ronin chapter, it gives us, like, I really enjoy that this franchise, 40 years in the making, is so diverse. If you want the nostalgia, it's there. If you want the humor, I go to Rise. If I want, you know, just something that feels good and it's warm, I go to Mutant Mayhem. If I want something dark and dreary, I go to Ronin. If I want something that's really deep and huge, expansive universe, I go to IDW. It's like you can find, I mean, we haven't even touched on the Batman crossover, 2007. Like there's just so much. So whatever mood or vibe, there's it's all different, you know, like I know a whole bunch of fandoms have multiverses, but I feel like this one is so, every single puzzle piece is so different that whatever mood or feeling you have, you can go and find a match for it.
That is so true. If I want to cry into some ice cream, I reread The Last Ronin, and I just flip, like I said, right to, I go to Donnie dying, and I'm like, that's terrible. Yeah,
it is. Donnie has some atrocious deaths.
He really does. It's so scary. But yeah, I want to ask then, because we're talking about all these different moods we could pick depending on which story we go with. I'll ask as a last question to wrap up. I know I said the last one was the last question, but it was the last question. Just like the last Ronin really wasn't the last one, the last year's was. I feel like this makes sense because we were talking about movies. We didn't really, and we just talked about Batman. My favorite cartoon movie for the Turtles is Tmnt versus Batman, which is surprising because I'm not a huge Batman fan, but I love that one so much. And I wanted to know, lastly, what's your favorite cartoon movie of the Turtles?
Amanda, do you want to go first?
Are we including Mutant Mayhem in this?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Go for it.
Okay. I'm going to say Mutant Mayhem. I loved it. I feel like we've talked about it enough. So I'm just going to like push that aside for now and pretend that doesn't exist. And I want to give a shout out to 2007 because I love 2007. I think they're great characters. The Leo Raph fight, I will always just eat that up. I love it to death.
Yes.
I think the bad guys are cool. Karai's cool. April's cool. Casey's kind of a dork. But I think 2007, up until like a couple months ago, was my favorite animated movie. So,
I really like the 2007 one. I hate to be the hater. I can't get past the animation on it. Like if I could watch that movie with my eyes closed, I love it. And I do agree the Raph Leo fight scene was like, damn, that was good. And then it's just the animation. It's not for me. But I enjoy the plot and the story. I really enjoy the Rise movie. I think that I'm glad that happened. I think it gave a lot of closure to that story that could have kept going if the haters didn't hate it so much that it got canceled. I think the movie brought a lot of depth, and I think the animation, the flip side from the 2007, the animation in that movie was insane. It was the closest to anime that we've seen for TMNT. And the fight scenes were incredible. The colors were so vibrant and beautiful. But ultimately, I got to go with Mutant Mayhem. I don't know if it's just the newness factor and it's just the freshest in my mind, but I don't know that I have ever had that much fun watching a movie. Like I left that movie theater and my mouth hurt from smiling so much. And it's a rare feeling to get nowadays. Adulting can be hard. And so it was really fun to just turn off the adulting and just smile and laugh and genuinely enjoy an hour and a half 100 times over because I've watched it way too many times.
I love that.
What about you?
Like I was saying, my favorite is, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I have to admit I've watched the TMNT versus Batman way too many times. I've watched it with my son a lot. And I think it's because they just gel in that one for me. As I mentioned, not a massive Batman fan, but I like how they react to one another initially and how at the end of the day, there were all these really funny moments like a gunbrella and they were wondering who the Penguin is. And I thought that's really good. If you'd be dropped into Gotham, you would kind of go, what on earth is going on? I don't get it. So I really did like that one. I thought they interacted well. I always thought that's the live action movie I would really like them to make because I think it would be a good one. And you see Shredder kicking Batman's ass. which is, I think it was just a lot of fun. I could watch that one a lot. And sometimes if I just need background noise, I'll listen to it and I'll start laughing at some of the jokes that I know are coming up. So I really enjoy that one. And I also love Mutagen Mayhem. Took my kids. They had the time of their lives. We all got dressed up. We were all laughing. And we live about 3 hours from the nearest movie theater. If we lived closer, I think I could easily have gone, 5, 6, 10 times just to see what I missed the other times. So I do really love it. I think we have a lot of excellent choices as TMNT fans. I can't wait to see what future choices we have that, we'll be adding to our favorites list that, that we'll pick to listen to when we're working on something like Bayverse or, Anya loves Rise. And Amanda, you have your favorites that you would listen to again and again, right? And they change. And that's why I'm hoping for new favorites in the future. I'm hoping, if we met 2 years from now, would we be lucky enough to have so much new material that we could talk about? And I'll put a plea out there because we met initially, for everybody who doesn't know, we met initially on Zoom because we had never met in person, just on Facebook Messenger. And we discovered that everybody had this massive love for Sophie Campbell. And that massive love for her, I translated to Justin. And so I guess we'll just say nicely before we leave, Sophie, if you're out there, we're big fans. We have so many questions we have to ask you. So I know we could keep going on TMNT all night. But at this point, I guess we'll wrap up this episode. And I hope that we'll plan more in the future and that people will be interested in the future to listen. So I can't thank my co-hosts enough tonight. It has been such a joy and a pleasure to get to know Anya and Amanda. I feel very privileged, and they're just amazing people. So thank you both. If there's anything you want to say, like if you want to say hi, Mom, or hi to anybody, this is a good time.
Just thanks for the opportunity. This has been so cool. I have talked to people in the TMNT community for years and years and years, and it has never been exclusively women. And we have been able to talk about things from a perspective that only we can share. This has been so unique. I adore our conversations. I feel like I'm talking to my friends just without, I know it's being recorded, but it's just been a great conversation. A really good opportunity. Lydie, you did an amazing job moderating. And thanks, Justin, for giving us this opportunity. This has been so cool. I really hope we can do it again.
Yeah, thank you, Justin, for giving us, allowing us to take over your show. Thank you, Lydie, for putting this together. You've been a great coordinator for everything. And I think it's really cool, the depth of the conversations that we can have. It's common to have surface level conversations with other people, just, oh, who's your favorite character? Just like you're talking about your favorite dinosaur or something, but to really break down the depth of this franchise, obviously it can't be done in 10 minutes. We have 2 hours and I think we could go on for 10 more easily. So I've really enjoyed hearing your all's perspective on things. And I love hearing your perspective and changing things in my head. Like, oh, I never thought of it that way, or now I feel differently about this. And that's the best part of having these conversations, is hearing other people's perspective on things and how that could change the next time that I watch one of these things that I might have seen 100 times over. It's going to be new to me in that way. So I appreciate you guys sharing your perspective and your background and your knowledge. And I too hope we can do this again. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to Justin for letting us have our voice heard, because like we mentioned, that doesn't always come up. And there's so much I'm taking away, like now, because of what Amanda said about Mikey and the voices, and that they're just parts of his personality. I feel like I need to go reread this. And because of Anya's Donnie love, I think I'm going to watch Rise a bit more, and ask my son if he wants to watch the movie again, because it wasn't a bad movie. And I feel like we have to kind of do Justin some service here and say Rise Leo was very good in that movie.
He had a lot of growth.
Yeah, we honor and accept your favorite turtle, Justin. So I'm going to wrap this up and say good night from the sewers. Thank you for letting us raid them. We'll put everything back the way it was before we leave, because we're women and we're nice, we're considerate. So thank you so much to Anya, our Donnie fan. Thank you to Amanda, our Raph fan. And I am kind of hanging in the loop and not sure what to say because I am the Mikey fan. So thank you so much and have a great evening, everyone.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious. It's coffee that can wake the dead. With over a dozen different roasts and flavors, Deadly Grounds can satisfy the most finicky of coffee addicts. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
It's pizza time.
And now, in a segment that we call Pizza Time, where we discuss any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle or pizza-related food, I give you Pizza Time. For today's recipe, we're going to be looking at a blue and white pizza. We're going to start out with the pizza crust. 2.5 to 3 cups of gold medal all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 package regular active or fast-acting dry yeast, about 2 1/4 teaspoons, 3 tablespoons of olive oil or vegetable oil, 1 cup of very warm water, about 120 degrees Fahrenheit to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. For the toppings, 1 teaspoon of olive oil, 1/3 cup refrigerated Alfredo sauce, 1/2 cup crumbled gorgonzola or blue cheese, 1 cup of mozzarella cheese, shredded, 4 medium green onions sliced, about 1/4 cup, they're optional, and then 1/2 teaspoon of dried oregano leaves. In a large bowl, mix 1 cup of the flour, the sugar, salt, and yeast. Add 3 tablespoons of oil to warm water mix and mix well. Stir in enough remaining flour until the dough is soft and leaves the side of the bowls. On a light floured surface, knead the dough for about 4 to 5 minutes or until smooth and springy. Cover loosely with plastic wrap. Let rest for 10 minutes. Heat the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Spray a large cookie sheet or a 12-inch pizza pan with a cooking spray. Divide the dough in half. Press half the dough into a 12-inch round on a cookie sheet. Brush the dough with 1 teaspoon of oil. Bake for 10 to 12 minutes or until the crust is golden browned. Step 4. Spread the Alfredo sauce on the warm crust. Sprinkle with the gorgonzola cheese, onions, mozzarella, and oregano. Bake for 9 to 11 minutes or longer until the cheese is melted. And that's your pizza, the white and blue pizza special.
Cowabunga, dudes!
Thank you for listening to the Epic Tales from the Sewers podcast. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. This podcast has no affiliation with Eastman, Laird, Mirage Studios, IDW Studios, Archie Comics, or Nickelodeon Studios. This podcast is a member of the Dorkening Podcast Network. Check out thedorkening.com for other podcasts. Epic Tales from the Sewers is recorded by Justin Cooper and Eric Will.
Greetings and shabebans. We are the Retro Reductopus Cephala Podcast, a long-form bi-weekly show that celebrates all the things that made growing up awesome.
Yeah, that sounds good, but I don't know what all those words mean.
I think what Parasite seems trying to say is that on Retro Redoctopus, we explore a range of retro goodness, from toys, video games, and movies, to cartoons, and even snacks and school lunches.
Oh.
And we do it all with a positive spin, a slew of killer guests, and some very adult language.
And you know what else is cool?
No.
This crazy show is part of the Door King Podcast Network with new episodes every Tentacle Tuesday.
What's that?
And if waiting 2 weeks for a new episode gives you a sad, know that we drop bonus episodes all the time, like the off-format Crow's Nest and an interview series we call The Brig.
You can listen to Retro Redoctopus on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any app that's cool enough to carry the only show that celebrates all the things that make growing up awesome.
It took me 10 years to make the perfect man cave.
And then we took it over. And we made it into the multiversal chamber.
Then I started my own podcast.
And we took that over too. And we're the co-hosts, the Multiverse Kids.
Yeah, and I'm the dad, the geeky dad. And every week, we what?
We review the movies, shows, and books, games, and toys.
Yeah, and sometimes we even have a special guest. So, join us every week on the Geeky Dad Podcast.
Hello, intrepid listeners. This is the Generation Playlist Podcast, a podcast about music where we are your guides through a particular group or artist.
We talk about the music, and then we make a customized playlist to share with you, our listener. And you can check us out wherever you listen to podcasts and find our playlists on Spotify.